Welcome, space venturers, one and all, to the first episode of an exciting new adventure for both you at home and us here in the studio. Welcome to our brand new podcast, Dick Rogers, Space Detective. But before we get too far into it, let me get some introductions out of the way. For those unfamiliar, my name is Joanna Hemlock, and I've come here today with an exciting discovery. I've already told the full story on my personal podcast, A Cup of Hemlock, but I'll give you the short version. On a hunt for the unique treasures that can be found on vintage and home recordings, I discovered a box of reel-to-reel tapes, and upon taking them home, I discovered a special treat. What most vintage format obsessives can usually only dream of, rediscovering lost media. This particular discovery was known as The Adventures of Dick Rogers, Space Detective, an incredibly long-running radio drama series that, despite never gaining a very large audience, managed to remain on the air on one station or another for a little over 5 decades. And while most of the tapes are in pretty rough shape, my friends and I here at N.E.R.D.S have taken the time to transcribe episodes as we uncover them, for the sake of media preservation.
And it was no small feat, believe me.
And this new podcast will feature our re-dramatizations of these episodes for your listening pleasure. Joining me today for our inaugural episode, fellow N.E.R.D.S member Eleanor Barkley, who you just heard commenting a moment ago.
Thanks for having me along. Yeah, as I was saying, transcribing these scripts has been no easy feat. Audio quality aside, the episodes themselves are very unusual for radio dramas of the time. From what we can tell, each writer would really bring whatever they were interested in to the story at the expense of little things like continuity and consistency of style or tone.
That's something that I personally find very charming about the show. You never truly know what kind of adventure you're going to be in for until it's too late to turn back.
Definitely. And speaking of episodes...
Hey, before we get into the episode, why don't you let the audience know what N.E.R.D.S is, in case they didn't click through from A Cup of Hemlock?
Oh, yeah, that's probably a good idea.
That's our producer/engineer, Mike Nutley, or as we affectionately call him, Skeevy Mike.
I wish you wouldn't call me that.
Sorry, Mike. You guys, he's not really Skeevy. There's just a character in one of the episodes we found who was called Skeevy Mike.
Okay, I think they get it. Mike's right. Let's get back on track here. N.E.R.D.S, N.E.R.D.S, stands for Northeast Radio Drama Society.
Originally New England Radio Drama Society.
But as internet participation grew, the name seemed a little too specific, so we changed it.
Like we always say,
everywhere is northeast of somewhere.
As a group, we're always looking for those ephemeral jewels that could have been lost to time if nerds like us weren't combing through obsolete media. We post and discuss what we find, and as of right now, folks from, 64 countries?
67 at last count.
Wow.
67 different countries have joined us in the attempt to keep mainstream and corporate media from being the only things that survive in the current digital culture.
See, that's why you're the host. You can talk buzzword jargon better than anyone.
Thank you?
Anyway, the first episode of Dick Rogers we're presenting wasn't the first that aired, but it was the first we found, and it really captures the spirit of those first couple of years of the show.
Those familiar with retro sci-fi of the era will be right at home as Dick and the crew are called to investigate a mysteriously empty research station orbiting the planet Neptune. Written by Larry Hancher and originally airing July 16th, 1941, we present Dick Rogers versus the Frogmen from Neptune, Part 1, Fury of the Frogmen.
A distress call from the scientific outpost orbiting the huge aquatic globe of Neptune. Emergency. Stop. We are under attack. Stop. It came from the planet. Stop. Send help. We won't last much longer. Stop. I repeat, we are under attack. Stop. Please send help. Stop. Dear listener, you know that when danger calls, there is only one man the Galactic Investigative Force would send. These are the adventures of Dick Rogers, Space Detective. This week, we present the first in a 3-part series, Dick Rogers versus the Frogmen from Neptune. Tonight's episode, Fury of the Frogmen, brought to you by our sponsor, Pittman Flooring. When was the last time you really looked at the floors in your house? Chances are your wife looks at them every day, and if your house still has old-fashioned wood floors, chances are she's as tired of looking at them as she is of trying to sweep around all the scratches, warping, and cracks. What if I told you that the professionals at Pittman Flooring could cover those unsightly wooden floors with modern and durable linoleum tiles for a fraction of the cost of sanding and refinishing, and in a fraction of the time? Looking for something a little warmer and more luxurious? How about sumptuous wall-to-wall carpeting? Don't settle for outdated wood floors any longer. Just stop on into the showroom on Elm Street to speak with a salesman who can help you make a plan to modernize and revolutionize your home flooring. And now, we join our intrepid adventurers as they blast through the ether at unimaginable speed.
What's our ETA, Professor?
Our trajectory should intercept the orbit of the outpost at 0900 hours.
Do we have radio contact, Leslie?
We do, Dick. The distress beacon seems to be set to automatic. I can't raise anyone on the voice channel.
The schematics provided by the GIF say the outpost only has a 1-channel radio, so that's hardly...
Dick, I'm picking up some chatter on another frequency.
What are they saying?
I can't make any sense of it.
But Leslie, darling, you're fluent in every major language humans speak.
That's just it, Father. I don't think they're human.
As the huge blue orb grew in the forward window, the crew mulled over the possibility of contact with a new race of violent, barbaric aliens. They raced to pack up their investigative equipment and donned their bulky oxygen suits. Soon the cool blue disk filled their view, and as they drew closer, the outpost became visible. Where their rocket ship, the Gladys, was long, sleek, and graceful, the outpost was a bulky jumble of modules and containers, the surface studded with all manner of sensors and scientific apparatus.
We'll be ready to dock in 2 minutes.
Anything new on the radio, Leslie?
It sounds like a fairly short repeated message. I transmitted some audio samples back to the Mars station. Maybe the mainframe there can help with translation. But with the 3-hour transmission delay, we'll be waiting a while before we know what they're saying.
I hope I can get back to work on my miniature computer soon. If I succeed, we'll be able to house a mainframe nearly as powerful as the one on the Mars station in a room only 7 feet on a side, weighing less than 3,000 pounds. It'll still be too bulky for a rocket ship like this, but we can put some on other outposts throughout the solar system.
Keep dreaming, Professor. Next you'll tell me you're working on a computer that'll fit on a desktop.
Oh, don't be silly, Dick. The desk would have to be made of reinforced steel to even support something like that.
All right, you two. Let's get serious. We're heading into an unknown situation on an outpost we have no radio contact with, orbiting a giant ball of water 7 million miles from the nearest permanent settlement, with involvement of an unknown hostile alien race.
Throw in a floor show and some rye whiskey and it sounds like a heck of a Friday night.
Maybe next time we dock, the two of us can take in a floor show and maybe...
Now's no time for making social plans.
You're right, Professor. Let's get things buttoned up for docking. Leslie, can you help me with my helmet?
As long as you help me with mine. Dad says the suit is fine, but I think it's getting a little small, especially the helmet.
I see what you mean. The helmet barely fits. As for the suit, I think it really flatters your figure.
Well, I'd like to get one that's not so tight, but if you like it...
Don't you have a rocket ship to dock, Dick? I'll help my own child into a suit.
Child? I'll be 17 in a couple months.
You're right about the docking, Professor. I'll get on it.
Picture, if you will, the gleaming silver 50-foot-long rocket ship. Watch with your mind's eye as Dick ably coaxes it into alignment with the bulky, blocky science outpost. Then imagine the delicate precision it takes to get the airlock opening halfway down its length lined up with the corresponding opening of the outpost, all the while fighting the gravity of the planet trying to pull you away into greater danger. And you thought parallel parking your Studebaker was difficult. Luckily, our intrepid hero has the nerve, the grit, and the skill to make such a heroic feat a mundane task.
We're locked on. I'm about to cycle the airlock.
Make sure you double-check the pressure gauges. Who knows if the outpost is still pressurized?
We'll know in a minute. Here, I'll take that equipment case for you.
Thank you, Dick.
The pressure is bottomed out. No atmosphere at all. Double-check your suit seals.
Good to know. Now, Leslie, we don't know what we're walking into here. Whatever alien creatures launched this cowardly attack against a defenseless science outpost may still be aboard. We'll all have our laser rays out in charge, but try to stay behind me and your father. If anything ambushes us, I want it to be one of us who draws their attack. I don't know what I would do if anything happened to you.
Oh, Dick, you're so brave.
What about your dear old dad?
Oh, Father, you know I think the world of you both.
Our 3 daring pathfinders crowded into the airlock, a tiny antechamber between the 2 ships, barely larger than 2 phone booths put together. They attempt to make a safe transition to the stricken science outpost. As the air hissed out of the airlock into the Gladys, they could only wait in tense anticipation of what lay on the other side of the solid steel hatch door. Were they walking into an ambush, a gruesome scene of bloody carnage as they steel themselves to deal with what they will encounter? Let's have a word from Pittman Flooring. Like many of you, I like to care for my house. A couple of years ago, I noticed that the wood flooring in my entrance hall and living room had become very scuffed and scratched. Also, like many of you, I didn't have the free time to sand and varnish the floor myself. So I hired workers to do that for me. I ended up with a huge bill and floors that, only 2 years later, were already starting to look scuffed and scratched. I decided to do something about it and had the skilled professionals at Pittman Flooring install easy-to-clean, durable, and stylish linoleum throughout the whole house. My wife and I have never been happier with our floors. And I'm sure if you have Pittman Flooring cover up those ugly wooden floors, you'll be just as happy. So stop on down to Pittman Flooring today. And now, as the door hisses open, we rejoin those daring doers as they venture into the unknown.
All right, the air pressure is equalized. Let's move in and keep our eyes peeled. What do you see?
There's a lot of smoke. Can you see anything, Professor?
Activating suit light. Wait, is that smoke or is it steam?
You might be right. There's water everywhere.
Maybe that's why the atmosphere is off. Maybe the water shorted their system. Careful, boys. You don't want to get shocked if there's still current flowing.
Don't worry, I've got rubber soles.
I guess they don't call you space detectives gumshoes for nothing. Well, be careful anyway, Dick. I don't want either of you bantering too much to hear an ambush if we run into one.
As these valiant seekers carefully moved forward into the dim, hazy room ahead, they used the lights on their suits to peer into the shadowy enigmas that lay before them. They moved methodically, illuminating their mysterious surroundings a bit at a time.
It's clear over here. Are you two finding anything out of the ordinary?
Nothing here. The gauge cluster here might still be working. It looks like they've got a map of the ship with pressure gauges for each section. If I'm reading this correctly, it looks like this section and the 2 nearest it are depressurized, but most of the rest of the outpost is still holding air. Oh, look! A gauge cluster! Leslie, move out of the way and let me take a look at that. Leslie, keep that light still. I'm trying, Father.
What do you see, Professor?
It looks like they've got a map of the ship with pressure gauges for each station. If I'm reading this correctly, it looks like the pressure gauge for this section is bottomed out, and a couple near us, but most of the rest of the outpost is still holding air. It looks like one of those is the generator room. If they've lost atmosphere there, it would make sense that the power is out. Because coal can't burn without oxygen. Not that you're listening to me. Which makes sense, since coal can't burn without oxygen. Yep. And the coal hopper unit is depressurized as well. But it looks like most of the rest of the station at least has air. Whether or not it would be breathable without the power to circulate into the oxygen renewal unit is yet to be seen.
So the airlock and minor utility units don't have atmosphere, but but the rest of the outpost does. Sounds like a planned strike to me. That goes a long way to confirming that these Neptunians might be intelligent. But how would they have known which sections to target?
Maybe they've worked out how to translate English and picked up clues from monitoring radio traffic.
You're the language expert. Do you think that's feasible?
That's ridiculous. The outpost has only been operating for a few months. There's no way they could have deciphered English within that amount of time. Maybe they have a translation computer like the one we've got on Mars and Earth. Now, Leslie, surely you remember that there aren't any land masses on the planet? Do you mean to tell me that you think they've invented a computer that works while submerged in water? They could have any sort of structure under the water there. Maybe
I'll be interested in the specifics once we've explored more of the outpost and figured out if the scientists who were aboard this station are still alive and safe. For now, we'll just have to keep our curiosity at bay and keep investigating.
You're right. Of course, Dick.
In perfect agreement, our valiant venturers continued their search of the outpost, along the way encountering the dastardly deeds of their unknown alien antagonists.
Dick, look! There's a huge hole in the hull! It must be 20 feet across! How could they have torn through the hull of the outpost like that? It's made of 3-inch thick steel!
From the drips and beads of metal around the breach, it looks like they burned their way in with some sort of high-intensity laser.
Oh, if they have a laser that powerful, I sure hope they don't still have it pointed in our direction. They could vaporize us in a heartbeat.
Dear Leslie, try not to worry. I'm sure we'd be able to see if it was within range here.
There's no way it could be powerful enough to do this kind of damage from the planet. Besides, the very idea of an underwater laser is utterly preposterous.
The contrast between the ragged, horrifying gash in the wall of the generator room and the cool beauty of the cerulean orb revealed by the light of the distant sun was shocking. But there was no time to admire the view, while the malicious deeds of these unrevealed foes of humanity remained to be investigated. Our stalwart crusaders of truth continued their meticulous search of the outpost in the mess hall.
Look at how the food was just left on the tables. Those fiendish Neptunians must have swept through here and simply hauled all of the crew out.
How many crew members were there?
The brief from GIF listed 20 crewmen.
And they've all disappeared, nearly without a trace.
Here, on the wall. Could this be a laser burn? No, Lizzie, that's clearly a laser burn from when the crew was being kidnapped. But that's what Clearly, these Neptunians are incredibly violent species to attack a peaceful science mission like this.
Well, we'll just have to be extra careful. Keep your eyes peeled and your ears open, just in case some of them are still around, somewhere.
They continued to work their way through the laboratories, crew quarters, and every other environment on their way to the command bridge.
Dick, the gauges on the bulkhead door into the bridge are showing not only pressure and oxygen, but emergency backup power. That must be what is keeping the emergency beacon broadcasting.
We'll have to be careful entering. It could be that there is one or more crewmen holed up in there with weapons trained on the hatch, in case the aliens come back. Or those monsters could have left a trap in there, knowing any investigation would have to come to this section.
Leslie, you stay back for right now. I'll stay behind Dick.
All right, Professor. I'll turn the hatch wheel and swing it open. You keep your blaster trained on the opening, but don't fire unless you see something that isn't human.
On the count of 3. 1, 2,
3!
What lies behind the dread portal of fate? Enemies? Allies? A nefarious trap? Unfortunately, we'll have to keep you, dear listeners, in suspense for just a moment longer, while we have another word from our sponsor. What could be worse than getting out of your bed on a chilly winter's morning and stepping on the cold, uncomfortable wooden floor? Now, I know you can keep your slippers handy or buy an expensive wool rug to avoid that discomfort, but there's another option. Head over to the Pittman Flooring Showroom on Elm Street and browse their selection of premium wall-to-wall carpet made out of revolutionary nylon fiber. You simply won't believe the comfort and luxury these carpets can provide at pennies on the dollar that you would have had to spend on wool rugs. You could say goodbye to those torturous wooden floors and your slippers and sink your toes into the sheer luxury available from Pittman Flooring. And now, we rejoin our fearless investigators as they peer into the unknown.
Professor, what do you see?
lights on after all this darkness. I think we can move in if we go carefully.
Can we close the hatch behind us and get these helmets off? They're so heavy.
If you'll stay out here for a moment, Leslie, your father and I will make a quick sweep of the room, and if everything seems safe, we'll do just that. I'm sure we'd all love to get that weight off our shoulders.
And after a quick sweep of the room, they entered the bridge, closed up after themselves, and doffed their helmets.
It's always nice to get out of that fishbowl, even if it's only for a short break.
I agree, even though I'm sure my hair is an absolute disaster.
This is an investigation, not a debutante ball. Who are you trying to impress? I'm sure we can overlook the hideous state of your hair for the moment.
Oh, Leslie, even the worst hair in the world couldn't possibly diminish your... Oh, I mean, it looks fine. We'll finish up in here, and you can get back to the ship and get things back under control.
Maybe I'll just head back now. If they were able to translate the radio signals from the planet, we should be getting a broadcast back from Mars pretty soon. I'll go and get set up to receive.
That's the first good idea you've had today.
Be careful, Leslie. I'll keep my comms on so you can let us know if you see anything on the way back to the rocket.
I will. And I'll open a channel from the GLaDOS once the transmission from Mars starts so you can hear it too.
She needs to have a helmet with enough room inside to keep a respectable hairstyle. We'll have to get her an adult-sized suit next time we dock.
But she's so young. Why would she need an adult size?
Professor, she's almost 17 years old. She's a full-grown woman. In fact, there's something I've been meaning to speak with you about.
Oh, Dick. You know Leslie will always be my precious little girl, and if you ever...
Wait! What's this stuck under the cushion here?
Some spare change?
It's a book!
What kind of book?
The captain's logbook.
Does it say anything about the attack?
Let's see. Here it is. June 20th, year 1997. Last night I was called away from a briefing about our sonar sweeps of the planet to the bridge by Communications Officer Collins. He wanted me to listen to the radio broadcasts we had intercepted from the planet. We couldn't understand their heathen lingo, but the tone of their voice seemed agitated. I told him to make audio recordings and transmit them back to the Mars base in hopes the computer there could make translations.
Here's the recorder. I'm going to play back a little to see if it sounds like what we picked up on the way here.
The radio chatter stopped as soon as you press record. Is that supposed to happen?
It must not be set up to keep sending audio to the speakers while it's recording. I'll switch it off and see if I can correct that.
It stopped again. Do you even know if we're getting anything recorded?
The needle is moving on the VU meter. I think it should be working, but I guess I can stop the recording and play it back to make sure we're...
That can't be right.
That's the whole recording. They must have had it set up to record from the microphone instead of the receiver.
You've guessed it in one, Professor. Listen to this. It seems that the recording circuit had somehow been patched into our microphone. But not only that, it had switched the radio into broadcast mode. After we switched off the recorder, a voice came through, and though unintelligible, seemed harsh. Then the frequency shut down. I had Collins shut down all the comm channels on the outpost, and we continued to monitor transmissions from the planet. Almost 2 hours later, we started receiving another direct broadcast from the planet. It was in a computerized voice, like you'd hear from a translation program used on one of our mainframes back home.
Leslie was right. They do have an aquatic computer.
The message was as follows. Unknown object in orbit. We have observed your invasion of our planetary space, and we were willing to wait for you to make contact. But your use of sonic weaponry against us has forced us to take a less peaceful stance. State your purpose for being here, or we will be forced to respond to your attacks with violence. We will monitor this frequency, and if you do not respond within 8 hours, our attack will commence.
And then they just waited out the clock until the laser killed the generator module? Your GIF scientists are such cowards!
Wait! Listen to this. I wanted to radio GIF to see how they thought we should proceed, thinking we had plenty of time to figure out what message to send home. After only 1 hour, we had another transmission from the planet, saying roughly that our time was up, and they would be attacking in 4 hours. The attack came 30 minutes later, with an energy beam directly from the planet.
The translation program must not have been able to directly convert units of time accurately.
That's not surprising considering differences in both culture and length of orbit of the planet.
Oh, Dick! The transmission from Mars base is coming in. I'll patch it through.
Thank you, Leslie. We've got some things to get you caught up on after that.
Sounds good. The transmission should be coming through. Unknown vehicle approaching Neptune. We are aware that you are responding to a distress signal sent from the craft which has invaded our planetary orbit. If you do not respond on this frequency in 32 hours, we will be forced to attack. Message repeat.
If our translation program has the same problems as the Neptunians, we most likely have less than an hour to respond.
What do you mean?
We'll fill you in once we get back to the Gladys. Professor, let's get our helmets on and get back.
Leslie, we'll be there to explain in a few minutes. Get the airlock prepped for us.
Yes, Father.
With the clock ticking, can our unflinching posse defuse the situation before a laser burns them out of orbit? As Dick and the professor hurry back to the Gladys, we have another message from our sponsor. I'll never forget the feeling I had one day after walking into my living room and hearing my son sobbing in pain. I asked Jimmy what was the matter, and he choked out around his sobs that he had come in from a game of stickball and, as his mother asked, taken off his dirty shoes. But when he entered the living room, he had gotten a splinter from the dated, rough, uncomfortable wooden floor. I did my best to get that little ninny to stop crying and advised him that the best thing to do would be to walk off the pain. Little did I know that wound caused by that very splinter would later become infected and lead to the foot being amputated. Now, don't worry, I have 2 sons who aren't constant disappointments. But if I had gone to Pittman Flooring sooner, I could have avoided the whole inconvenience. So if you have wooden floors like I used to, stop in at Pittman Flooring on Elm Street and speak to them about covering up those ugly, outdated wooden floors today. And now we return for the thrilling conclusion of tonight's tale. The lads gave Leslie the scoop, and once they made it back to the Gladys, they are starting to formulate a plan.
We need to send a message down to the planet and quick. But what should it be?
I say, we send a message asking for coordinates to land and come in guns blazing. Blow those evil monsters into next Thursday.
Judging by the damage to the outpost here, I don't think they'd have much trouble burning us out of the sky before we could do much damage.
You're right, Leslie. We'll have to be diplomatic and hope that this is another predicament we can talk our way out of.
If there's a man for that job, it's definitely you, Dick. Ever since you managed to talk my father out of his evil ways, I believe you can get us out of any jam we find ourselves in.
You're right, Leslie. The man who made me see the error of my ways is certainly the right man for the job.
If you two are convinced, Leslie, set the radio to broadcast.
Right away, Dick.
And mere moments later, the voice of Dick Rogers, space detective, was thundering down to the inhabitants of Neptune.
People of Neptune, creatures, inhabitants of Neptune, we have come in peace merely to investigate a distress call from the scientific outpost orbiting your planet. We came to your planet with no knowledge of your existence and wish to move forward in a spirit of cooperation and friendship. You will tell us the whereabouts of our fellow Earthlings and negotiate for their release, or the might of the Jiff will descend on you like the hammer of the gods, or whatever the equivalent of a god might be that might exist on this backward ball of water.
Now we just have to wait for the response.
That was really great, Dick. I'm sure we'll be back on our way to Jiff Base in no time.
And in a matter of minutes, they had their response.
We will send a delegation to your location to negotiate. Expect our arrival in 4 hours.
That means we have 30 minutes.
We have scanned your vessel, and if we detect any activity in your weapons systems, you will not survive long enough to launch any attack.
Now we just have to wait.
Oh, Dick, what do you think they'll look like?
Unknown beings from an unknown planet? They could look like anything.
Don't worry, dear. If they're too gruesome, I'm sure you can go into your quarters.
In 30 minutes on the dot was the sound of knocking from the airlock door. Professor Willis went to run the airlock through its cycle. Then, as the hatch swung open...
Oh, Dick!
In walked the Neptunian delegation. Leslie nearly fainted at the sight of the 7-foot-tall frogmen carrying menacing laser rifles. As no less than 8 heavily armed monsters trooped into the room, they formed 2 lines, which, upon separating, revealed a more richly costumed example of the species. Though not so tall or broad as the guards which preceded him, he still advanced confidently into the chamber. On his wrist he wore a device with what looked like a miniature speaker only 4 inches across. He held it up to his inhuman mouth and began to speak. Soon after, the translation program started to translate nearly in real time.
You will accompany us back to the planet to negotiate for your lives and the lives of your compatriots, or you will die.
Can Dick talk his way out of this predicament? Will the Frogmen exterminate mankind? Will Dick and Leslie finally wind up together? To find out, you'll have to join us next week for the next adventures of Dick Rogers, Space Detective. Brought to you by Pittman Flooring. You'll never have to suffer the agony of walking on wooden floors again after a visit from the skilled professionals at Pittman Flooring.
And we're back.
Thanks, Mike. That was Fury of the Frogmen. And obviously it wasn't the whole story. Somewhere out there lurk the other 2 parts of the trilogy.
Can I tell them?
Absolutely.
We haven't found the tapes of those episodes yet, but we've got some leads, including an internal radio station memo mentioning the titles. So hopefully we'll be able to present Future of the Frogmen and Finale of the Frogmen in the not-too-distant future.
Ooh, MST3K reference. Nice.
I thought you'd like that.
And I hope all of you out there enjoyed your first taste of the adventures of Dick Rogers, Space Detective.
Mike, when you edit this, you have to put the big echo on the audio when Joanna said that.
I can definitely do that, yeah.
But before we sign off for the week, if you did like what you heard, make sure you share the show with your friends, family,
enemies, strangers you run into in the street.
And follow the show on social media.
Hit them with the handles, Skeevy Mike.
We're on Facebook at Dick Rogers Pod, Instagram at Dick Rogers Space Detective, and Twitter at Rogers Space.
And make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you can catch a new episode each month as we release it.
Oh, you forgot the tagline I wrote.
Right. Be sure to tune in for your next Dick appointment. Same space time, same space place.
This episode's nerds are Wendy Wilwert as Joanna, Translation Program and Communications Officer, Angela Ventris as Eleanor, Leslie, and Captain, Michael Storm as Mike Nutley, Jessica DeMaria as the Announcer, Logan Wright as Dick Rogers, Emily Anderson as Professor Willis. Fury of the Frogmen was written by Nicholas Johnson. Sound design by Michael Storm, featuring sounds from Zapsplat.com, freesfx.co.uk, and freesound.org. Music by Nicholas Johnson. Audio editing by Nicholas Johnson.